I'm Kevin Davis, and this is the Catholic Family Podcast, and I'm joined by the one and only Father Stephen McKenna, who is kind enough to join us again on this podcast to talk about, well, an interesting topic. I think one that people are hearing more and more, especially lately. There's a pretty funny story we're going to talk about in a bit, but and that is AI, artificial intelligence. And I know people who watch the show know that for what boy, probably 6 months now, 6 months, a year ago, I lost a part-time writing job to AI. Pretty much they just said, yep, we don't want to pay you anymore. And the computer can do a good enough job of translating these basketball articles. So, bye, and so it's pretty wild to think that a lot of people are going to lose their jobs, I think, with this type of stuff in the next years. And I'm not saying that's necessarily means you shouldn't do that, I guess, because okay, then we should never have had cars, we should never had the industrial revolution, etc. But it still, to me, is a scary thought, partly because, well, it's the industry that I'm I guess in. But I know there's many other issues, so that's why Father's here to talk about it. Maybe some of the moral aspects, and just kind of have a chat about AI, because it's something that I'm sure Father, if you're online at all now, you see it all over the place. And what are your basic thoughts on what's going on with this technology?
Well, I mean, my first basic thoughts are there's enough people in this world that are struggling with regular intelligence. I mean, artificial intelligence is gonna,
Maybe we need it.
pretty much sweep the carpet for with humans, I think.
Fair.
And then also on top of it, it's sort of like, I'm still mesmerized that calculators work. So I mean, it's like, so yeah, I think, but in all seriousness, I think I think there's like a lot of things. There are aspects where it's you could definitely see that there can be potential benefits to it as it develops, and areas that you can see it making life better, facilitating certain elements of life, or facilitating also intellectual endeavors in life. I've seen a lot of stuff advertised lately, which I would like to learn more about. How kind of dovetailing off of your translating job, that they have a lot of these new programs out now for language learning, where it's you almost basically have like an AI tutor
Hmm.
to have conversation with, and to correct you and everything like that. Learning a language, I would be interested to see how that does, and all of that. So there are some things that you can see where it could potentially be beneficial, but then again, I think that the real I guess there's but there's also some kind of frightening aspects to it. I think the more autonomous it is kind of a bit scary, as you mentioned too. Are we gonna sort of uh, are we going to engineer ourselves out of existence, as it were? Out of jobs and abilities to do things. I also, there's a lot of things like, how reliant will we become on it, and then I think the fears of mental manipulation and control of the masses that it can be used to have, and then twisting and shaping narratives, but based on manufacturing or distorting reality and through voice and
Did you hear that,
images.
Father? What they did? I think it was it the Google? I think Google came out with an AI chat program, and apparently, I think it was Google. It's someone in the comments. Tell me if I'm wrong, but I think it was Google. And they obviously someone has to engineer these things, right? Someone has to write the script, the code. It's not like the computer's writing its own code. There has to be some parameters for the computer to use. And so somehow what they did was they made it so woke that they literally had, if you typed in what was an example, like show me Albert Einstein, they literally had a black Albert Einstein. I mean, like literally
Oh my
It
goodness.
was so like clearly they wanted to go woke, and they wanted to, you know, be careful or whatever, and it was crazy. So if and it was another one, if you said, show me a typical American family. And so, of course, it showed a black family, which that's, I'm fine with that. But what it did is it gave these black people extremely prominent features. Let's just say that, features that are, I would say pretty insensitive. Let's just say so it's just an unbelievable thing that what they tried to do just totally backfired. I think they shut it down after a couple of days. It just shows you that, I guess, as you say, if it's autonomous, how, I guess, how autonomous can it be? I guess some of these things, as you say, like the language, I think that's fascinating because it can pull from like the whole internet, and the way they do it, I don't even understand it honestly, but clearly still someone is writing the parameters, someone is controlling it. And it's what you say, they can use it to control the masses. I would think too.
Well, yeah, I think that is a legit fear, though. Is that that it is now to a point where it can, I guess you can say, I mean, for lack of better term, I know that this, true linguistic reality of it would be inaccurate, but for lack of a better term, it can learn, and so that to the point that you don't necessarily need somebody to write code for it to learn from the data that it inputs from its experience around it. It allows it to make adjustments for what it sees and interacts with. It starts off something sort of basic and simple, like that. You had that. I know a lot of like the robotic stuff comes out of Massachusetts and MIT, and you had that, like robotic dog looking thing, and is able to realize there's a box in front of it and jump itself up
Hmm.
on top of and land on top of the box, and then, or I mean, think about, I mean, uh, think about your the people have Roombas, that, the vacuum cleaner that does the Joe Biden at the end of the speech impression, where it just doesn't kind of turns back and forth like this, where it's, uh, but it does it like it learns what your room looks like and where your furniture is, so that, yeah, the first time around it's looking through sensors and recognizing that there are objects there. But then the more it does it, from what I understand, I mean, it could be wrong, but from what I understand, the more it does it, the more it remembers where those things are, so it doesn't have to spend as much time and can create more efficient routes around your living room to vacuum and things.
But doesn't that make sense
That's
then, Father?
that's
Sorry,
just
doesn't it make more sense than that? I mean, like that would be an objective. Like they're, what it's doing is like literally objects. It's seeing this, and this. And I guess like my issue, if I look at like the job that I lost, so a computer can come in and say basketball player one, scored so it can say, what happened, the objective things, that this is what happened, but they can't say, the feeling of the crowd or something. And I guess maybe they can teach it to go and find tweets or Facebook posts or something, and then pull that into the article, and maybe maybe that's where it'll go eventually. But to me it seemed like, what if you ask a one of these AIs, what is racism, just for
mm,
example, or what is the Catholic faith? I mean, that is, I mean, in a lot of ways, Catholic faith's not subjective, but you see what I mean. Different people are going to give you different answers. So how does an AI determine that? Someone has to program what it's,
right.
right. I would think.
Well, I mean, that's where it's, you you probably get in the weeds where as to what we understand and what we can't understand. And obviously, it's going to remove an aspect of the human elements to it, but it's going to imitate human elements as much as it can, because it can draw from many sources. So to use your aspect of the crowd in a basketball game, the reaction of a crowd, it has millions of sporting events that it can look at, and it can compare decibels and, types of cheers versus jeers versus boos versus chanting of, slogans for the team versus, kind of movement of the people. So it still is able to take in that tangible reality, but also from such a wider reality than we have um, in it. But the more intangible things that you say, that are very uniquely human, you know, the idea of feelings, like it can imitate what seems like feeling, but how do you actually get it to import that type of effect that it would have on a situation? Or um yeah, some of the things that are subjective in experience, um how would it manage to operate that way? Or aspects of morality, again, if it's going to be writing, or you could have it eventually be giving. I mean, I think they already have the technology to creating sort of like simulated humans to give simulated reports of, oral reports of things on televised, in that way. How do you, if you're watching and that looks like a human being, it speaks like a human being, it has facial movements like a human being, but it's not going to be able to have the nuances of human emotion necessarily nailed down, or ethics, and morality that way too. Because thinking about it, you could program in generalities that, um, for instance, if you have scenario A or scenario B, in scenario A, 5 people die, but scenario B, one person, if you could either, and it is like a either or situation. In scenario A, you have 5 people that end up dying, and in scenario B, you have one person that dies. But if that one person is your child, and you're the one who makes that decision, obviously that's not just a linear equation that can be solved by something necessarily artificial. So I think some of that is kind of scary. And like you said, who are the people that are programming these things to interact that way? Well, it's not Jimmy from Iowa who works a combine.
Right. Right.
It's people, these wackos from Silicon Valley that you would not trust with any dictation toward your family. But these are the people that are in that, sort of like microcosm think tank that are coming up with all of the programming and everything like that. And so it's going to have, be conveying ideals and things like that, uh, on a mass level of control. I would think that to try to create a certain type of mentality, certain type of dynamic in the human aspect, and that is a scary point to it. But I mean, you see this whole new technology sort of sort of working its way into every fabric of of life. It's you see now we have, I mean, like Tesla's come up with basically, pretty much almost like automated self-driving cars. Y- And on the one hand, you look at it and you think to yourself, okay, well, I get tired when I'm driving sometimes, so it'd be nice to not have to worry if I doze off. Or, a computer can have a faster reaction time than I can to if a ball and a child come bouncing out into a street, or a deer comes crossing through, or whatever it is. Again, I I can appreciate, some of the benefits that might come from that. But then at the same time, I think about it and I say, well, my GPS screws up getting to me, telling me where to go half the time anyway. So, I mean, is it gonna be foolproof? And there again, you tie something like that that seems just beneficial to what you're doing, like beneficial to society as a whole. But let's take that example of the little child and the ball bouncing across the street. If it recognizes object, and it, in a half a second that this object comes out from behind another car, and it tries to avoid that object to save, to not hit it, or it does the calculation or something like that and says, oh, wait a second, there's no way to avoid the object in front of us. So, we're going to brake, but we're still going to keep on and hit that object. Whereas you as a human being might look and say, I can get out of the way of the object. Yes, I will hit something else. I'll hit the car that the child came out from, but I'd rather hit the car with my car and take my chances than run over
Right.
a kid. I mean, you can make that type of determination yourself. Whereas, is AI going to make that determination? And are you going to entrust that determination to AI? Is it going to be, I mean, there's just a lot of intangibles that go with these things that we seem so ready to just throw
Yeah.
ourselves behind, as a society, without saying maybe we should, have a lot of long-term testing behind it. And I mean, I don't know the answer to it, or sometimes I just think we've gone too far in technology. Personally, I think that sometimes it's great to make advancements, but to what end? How far?
Well, there's a great quote, Father. That they kept all they kept asking is if they could. They didn't ask if they should, and I think that's
Mhm.
that's exactly as you say. That it's always a question of what can we do next. And Father, one of the things I think about the car that's a really interesting point. That I mean, you didn't even bring up the point that because it's controlled by a computer, someone can hack that. That's not conspiracy theory.
Yeah,
Someone can hack. Let's government or whoever you want to say. Someone can just say, "Oh yeah, you're not driving anywhere today." Hey,
yeah,
hey, Father, you scored a bad point against the social justice system, and so guess what? You're not going to drive.
yeah.
But sorry, and that is totally something that could happen. I'm telling you, in China, I think I've heard rumblings that China's already kind of putting that into practice. Not maybe not to that extreme, but it's coming. I think I've heard someone say everyone should have an extra car in their parking lot that doesn't have a computer in it. And I think you got to go back to what 19 before 1980 or something. I don't know, but get an old
Yeah.
banger in there because I mean they can shut this stuff down.
Yeah, I mean, that's the thing. I mean, I mean, my first car was an '87 Oldsmobile Cutlass Supreme, and there wasn't a single computer in that car. But guess what? You know, any mechanic could fix problems with it very
Yeah,
easily.
yeah,
Now, it seems that there's so many electronic problems with it that you have to take it to, you can't just learn to do it necessarily on your own to
yeah.
fix it. And when you take it to a professional, it seems like, I mean, it's sort of like poke and shoot, and oh, let's try this and see if that works. Let's try this and let's see if that works. And it's very frustrating at times. But in addition to that, I think sometimes too with it is like you talk about the idea of, like, uh, we talk about the car idea, and think about this: if your car, let's say, because it's going to happen. This is not a hypothetical. It already has with Tesla, with some of those self-driving cars, and they say you're supposed to monitor it and everything like that. But if you tell me my car drives by itself, then how close are you going to monitor it, right?
Hmm.
But the thing is that, you know you are you're opening yourself up for a lot of big question marks. Let's say something does fail in the myriad of computer aspects that are driving your car, and all of the nearly infinite possibilities that can come from the universe around you as you're driving it, and it gets into an accident. Something doesn't work quite right, and you get into an accident. Who is at fault? Who's
Hmm.
liable? Who's y- as my
Tesla?
am
Yeah.
I going to have to pay insurance for that? And are my insurance rates going to go up because I didn't caused the problem. It's not my fault. Is Tesla? No way. There's not a chance that any of these car manufacturers are going to take responsibility or liability for it. You know, you end up killing somebody. You know, you end up hitting somebody, and it causes a death. Who who is, you know, ultimately bears responsibility for that? Or you know, are we, you know, who, and just even just for the financial part of it, who replaces the car? You know, am I just luck? I mean, I drive a lot for doing the missions, and do a lot of rental cars, and there's these new cars now that have they're not automated in any way, shape, or form, but they have that like sensor where it
Mm-hmm.
recognizes that it's a car in front of you, and it slows you down if you're in cruise control, so you don't, you know, get too close to tailgating the car or whatever it is. But there's been many times where it's raining, or I've hit enough bugs and stuff like that where it says like, you know, sensor is offline, doesn't work because of the fact that it's been raining out, you know, or your front of your car's dirty and things like that. So it's like you're gonna be in your self-driving car, all of a sudden it's like, sorry, not working anymore, you know,
Yeah.
just in the middle of it all,
Right.
and do
Right.
that. I know a number of pilots. I mean, and yeah, they have um, you know, the autopilot for the planes, but every single one of those pilots that flies a plane that you're flying in knows every aspect of that plane inside and out, and could fly it anywhere they're needing to go with remarkable abilities, just if multiple features were to fail. You know, that thing could go pretty much analog on them completely, and they could go from point A to point B using other means and other they via math, via you know, points on the ground, via, I mean, all the communication with the towers, everything. There's different aspects to it, that there's ways for the human element to ultimately take control. And we see enough incidents where it's, you know, like that incident in New York where they took off and they had the bird strike, and
Mm.
the guy landed it in the river and saved everybody's lives. Well, all the talking heads got together afterwards and tried to to pinpoint them on, you know, you screwed up here, or whatever it was. And at the end of the day, he- that it was his decision to land in the river that saved everybody's life. And if any of the other decisions had been gone to, they wouldn't have made it. And so, I mean, there's an aspect to the human that is beyond calculation. I think that is necessary to be part of that, from just a common sense and a safety perspective. And yeah, we can make mistakes. I mean, a lot of accidents in airlines are due to pilot error too. Um, but I, I'd rather, I'd, you know, it's like I'd rather have be driving a car, and even though that if you look at it statistic wise, I could make more mistakes than a computer might be. Like the let's say it worked out as like the the reality of it was that the chances of me making a mistake are technically higher than the car making a mistake. I'd rather be the master of my own destiny, and than to have it completely up to essentially to chance, you know, than all altogether. And um, there's certain um, there's certain aspects to that. Um, but to your point about, you know, you made that point about it's we everybody keeps asking can we, but nobody asks should we. And it just makes me think of, there's so many things like this that come along that we end up sort of repeating history. Um, you know, it's the tower, it's the Tower of Babel. You know,
Mm-hmm.
is, can we build higher? Well, yeah, let's build higher. And you know, and why? Why is it that we keep reaching to these great heights? It's ultimately due to our own folly. It's, we think that um, we are the supreme beings. You know, we think that in a sense, we are sort of like gods. And so therefore, if we have the ability to go to the next step higher, then we just have to. And there's little regard for what the potential fallout of that could be, because um, again, you know, it's we've reached maybe perhaps too high, or like Icarus, we're too close to the sun, you know, and
Right. Well,
we
and
we
I think
didn't.
Father too. I mean, to bring it, we talked a little bit about baseball before the show. I think to bring it back a little bit to that, the human side of it. I think yeah. What if we literally lose some of our humanity? And I think that's kind of where we're going. And I think that's the
Yes.
baseball again. If people they've asked for years to have robot umpires. And honestly, it makes a lot of sense. I mean, I can see why you would do it. It's totally easy to do with the technology now, and it would be perfect. You'd have perfect balls and strikes. But Father, I'm sure you'd agree with me. You just then baseball is then it's you're kind of gone with baseball's not baseball anymore. You have to have some human error. You have to have bad umpires. That's part of
Yes.
the experience. If you start breaking these things for ease, for perfection, in some things it's good because I mean like safety and stuff. I think there's definitely an argument, but other things no. I mean like writing a basketball article. Okay, sure, you're gonna save a tiny bit of money, and the computer's gonna do a good enough job. Is that enough for us now? Is that really what we're going to be about? That just because you can save a couple bucks, you're going to have a computer do it rather than someone who's going to just for sure write a better story?
Yeah.
It's kind of gross. I think it just kind of yeah makes
and
me
and it
sick.
and it also it sterilizes things, and it takes away from. I mean, it's a real basic, kind of non-consequential, I guess, example if we use the sports analogy, but there is it is a good analogy in this sense that the that when you get rid of a human element, you there's it doesn't happen in a vacuum, and there is always a part that gets sort of sacrificed to that. So, like, the big talk is about the automated strike zone for a baseball game, right? And you think to yourself, oh, okay, well, we can do this with technology and all these things and everything. But what about that? I mean, like, I knew pitchers that I played with that were good enough to do this if they were pitching well, let alone these guys who are in the major leagues that are able to do that. Where it's if I can throw a pitch and I can hit the corner of the strike zone and get called strike, and I can do it again and get a called strike, and then I can move it out a fraction from there to be able to essentially be so close that I deceive the umpire. I've gained that fraction of an inch, and it doesn't sound to the non-baseball guy, it doesn't sound like anything, but that fraction of an inch is miles in a game of baseball. We were talking about, because I used to play, in leagues that we used wooden bats. That fraction of an inch could be the difference between hitting a ball really far because you got in the sweet spot, or my bat snapping in half because it was a little further towards the end of the bat. You to be able to sort of work that expansion and work on getting hitters to swing at pitches that are a little bit further out from what they're used to maybe not chasing after and things like that. It takes a lot of the psychology and the interest, which I think is the part of that interest is somebody who knows that game well, and has played that game. It takes some of the chess play out of it, which is
Yeah.
part of what makes it really interesting for people who are playing, that you can work things like that, and just sterilizes it, puts it in a sterile environment, and then all of a sudden we wonder why people aren't watching baseball very much anymore, because we've kind of, and it's like, oh, we got to move, shorter pitch time clocks, and we got to make all these
Right.
other major adjustments to the game to try to get people to watch the game more. Whereas it existed for decades upon decades perfectly fine without anybody griping about it, and with full stadiums,
But this
and
is
it's
what
just.
technology does, Father. It is
Yeah.
ruining people, and I can say it for myself. I mean, it turns our attention spans into like a 2-year-old. I mean, we can't
Hmm.
sit down and enjoy a baseball game anymore, and the next generations they're done for, Father. They're done
Yes.
for it. And I mean, if we keep building this stuff like AI, It's nightmarish to me. I just think
Yeah.
it is a terrible thing that's going to happen to the next generations, because they're not going to live lives. Everything's going to be
Well,
virtual. Their entire existence is going to be virtual.
well, that gets into a whole different aspect
Yeah,
to it, and one
sure.
that would be really good to actually eventually um, do a show with Dan Stanislavski on, just as a like a plug his way, because his doctoral thesis was regarding the dopamine effect in the brain,
Hmm.
and technology and things like that. That was his
Well,
doctoral thesis.
perfect. Yeah.
So that gets into a whole different aspect to it, the digitalization of the world, because we are now, you know, infantile in attention span, because everything is at our hands. It's, it's the reason why Father Jakata, towards the end of his life, started doing all these videos for stuff about the faith, and writing. He started up his Quid Leave um, um, website, the fatherchikata.com or .org or whatever it is, um, and because he started writing all these short articles and making these, kind of entertaining videos, and partly because, well, he's Father Chikata and he's was quite entertaining, but but also he would regularly say, people don't read anymore,
No.
and the days of being able to write a, long expose of something, and with tons of proofs and lots of research and everything like that, there it's there's still a place for it, but it's really narrow the scope of people that are actually to pay attention to that, and take something from it, because they would rather watch a 2-minute video and, like, oh, okay. And, if left to the scholarly people really writing long, well researched, well cited sources, and then just really bunch of mouth breathers, just making 10-minute videos about things, well, 95% of tradidom would all be in the dark, because they'd
Hmm.
all be just watching just the videos and saying, well, that's what my truth is now, because the TV told me. And so we have to utilize that space, because we have to get the information out there, and you sacrifice um, thoroughness and conclusivity of evidence for succinctness and a bit of entertainment aspect to it, because man has so shortened his attention span, that that's all he can take, that's all he can do. You look at, even you look back at uh, things about, from like saints in the past, in the, where in the 1700s or 1800s, you hear about these things where they would give sermons and they'd be 45 minutes long and things like that, and you go like, and the reality is that nobody can nobody no priest should give a 45-minute sermon anymore, because nobody there is remembering anything past 15 minutes, really, 20
Yeah.
minutes. And so you're just, it's not it's a waste. It ends up being fruitless. And you sacrifice the beginning part that they might have been starting to pay attention to, by prolonging it to be these long sermons, that don't work that way. It's just, but that's all, or largely due to the attention span being shortened by the constant release of dopamine that comes from the effect of screens. The very thing that we're doing now. You're the reason why people watch it and enjoy it. I like to think it's our charming personalities, Kevin, you and I,
Of course.
because so that's so we'll just leave it at that and just say it is. And no, but in part is, and this is why these forums are important, is because every time they sit down and they are looking at us on the screen, the way that the light from the screen works and everything like that has a cerebral effect on your brain, to 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 cause the release of dopamine, and which is the pleasure aspect, the pleasure serum for your brain, and so it likes it, um, yeah, it's the so that's a whole broader thing about the technological effect of the world and the virtual effect of the world. I mean, they're saying now that I saw something interesting. I think even Elon Musk um, believes this is going to happen, and he's in this space. Um, that that you know, humanity may be in for a very rapid downturn in population because of the fact that as older people die, we're not replacing them as much. People aren't having children as much, and we know that this affect very much in our generation and even the generation before us of birth control and various other aspects of limiting family sizes. But nowadays with the I guess what do they call it, Gen Zers or something like that, um, that they're saying like that largely speaking, they're not having kids, period. And it's it's essentially that they've become almost like asexual as a generation because they've so ruined their um their pleasure faculties of their brain that things of nature don't hold any interest to them,
Yeah.
and so therefore they they live basically in a virtual world, and that's their companionship, and that's their courtship, and that's their everything.
And I've heard, Father, I've heard that the next step to AI is to create, yeah, friends, pretty much, and to create people, as you said, if you can do that for a tutor, of course you can do it for a friend. I mean, or
Yeah.
and that's being the nice side of it. Obviously, there's a much grosser side to where they'll go with that too.
Yeah.
But I think that it's horrible because again, even if even the contact, if you and I, Father, only had contact, I'd love talking to you, obviously, but if we only talked over the computer, all that, and that's the only interaction we had, it would be pretty damaging too, right? Because there is just something to literally being in the same room with some, I mean, just
Yes.
experiencing something as a person, and I think that it's a
Hmm.
strange thing that I think many people now get
Yeah,
most of their interactions on over a screen. Yeah.
it's lost on a lot of people. I mean, there's so many people who are sort of socially retarded because of the fact that they don't develop those interpersonal skills because they're so busy texting, and they're so busy interacting on social media, and they're so busy checking out videos and TikToks and whatever. I know I'm sounding like an old bogey now, but the you know but it's true. They lose that interpersonal aspect to it. It's one of those things. You hear people making major life decisions and major life announcements via text message. You hear
Mm.
people breaking up with people they've been dating or something like that via text. I'm like, my dad would punch me in the head if he ever heard me do something like that. It's like you sit down and you
Rightfully
have a
so.
conversation with somebody, or how much gets messed up because people. I remember when I was in business before I was a seminarian, when I was a property manager, commercial property manager, we had, and that was before any of this stuff. I mean, that was back in, we had Nextels for cell phones. Um, so like the big kind of like digital interaction was not text message yet or anything like that. It was email. Email was the
Hmm.
big tech interaction that we had at the time, and we had an entire, we were a multi-billion-dollar company, and so and as the property managers, sort of like the face of that company. And so we had an entire meeting where we brought in an outside person uh, for this to talk about like email etiquette and email propriety and everything. And I thought it was going to be the biggest joke, but I learned things in that have served me to this day,
Interesting.
because it was like things like, no matter what, never insert emotion into an email that you read. That
Yeah,
was one of the things. They said
sure.
it's more often than not, you insert your emotion in there rather than actually perceive the emotion of the other person correctly.
Interesting. Sure.
And so, it's a realistic thing. Like so many times you send off like a rocket response in an email, or a response on a Facebook posting or something like that, because, and you ends up into like this argument, and people will ruin relationships or make themselves look like fools, or, all this stuff, because it's this sort of digitalized world, and but you have no, that human aspect is lost to it. It's, you don't know that the person's necessarily angry and doing that. They might actually be honestly asking a question to you, and they might have just worded it poorly when they wrote it. Or you might be, like I said, you might have been having a kind of a crummy day up to that point, and or this person's personality might bother you in general, and now you've inserted that aspect into the narrative as you read it. The interior voice in your head is now adjusted for those things as you're reading the email script, rather than reading it completely dispassionately.
And on the
And
flip side, you have the keyboard warriors, who I'm sure you know very well, Father, who are the ones who
mhm,
they just, they try to be these super tough guys, and like, because they're probably scrawny little dudes in their mom's basement. They're never going to have any actual tough guy moments in their lives. So they do that
mhm,
over a computer, and I mean, you see it all the time. I saw one guy on Twitter. This was a while ago. Threatening he wished he could punch a priest, like a traditional priest, in the face or something like that. It's like, so I was like, hey, tell you what, bro, you better really hope you never run into me, because I'll tell you who's gonna get hit in the face. And he's just like, oh yeah, well, I
yeah,
guess what, I carry a gun with me all the time. And it's just like, really, dude? It just
yeah,
like just the, and I guarantee you, he's this little scrawny dude who doesn't have a life, because nobody else, no actual person would say stuff like that. And
yeah,
and again, it's just the
yeah.
issue
And
when that's your
yeah,
medium. It's a,
be,
it's a
be
it's
careful
a
which be
which
careful which
priest.
priest you want to punch in the face too.
Please try to punch Father McKenna. That would make my day, Father, because that I would like to see the the finished product, I suppose, of that someday.
Well, I mean, that was the thing. It was very much, when I grew up, there was none of these things. And again, now I sound like an old fogey. I'm sorry for
It's not that long ago,
everybody.
Father, though. That's the amazing
No,
thing.
it's
I mean,
it's not.
it's not
It's
that
not.
long ago. It's
It's
incredible how
not that
fast this
long
has
ago.
happened.
It's yeah, it's not that long ago. But I mean, when I grew up, everything took place in real life, and there was no internet, there was no anything, and so everything took place in real life, and you were gonna make fun of somebody, that person's physically there,
Right,
and
right.
you better be, you're gonna try to be a tough guy, you better be a tough guy, because my father, like I said, my father's taught me many life lessons in life. And one of the things he taught me early on was that, you know, never get too big for your britches, because there's always somebody bigger, tougher, and stronger out there than you. And it might not be who you think it is too.
Right,
And
right.
so, and yeah, that's the ultimate humiliator is that, as what was it, as Mike Tyson said, everybody's got a plan until they get punched in the face. And so it's, it's, uh, there's a lot of truth to that. Not that I'm advocating punching people in the face, but um, but there's a lot of, there's something honest
Some
about
people
that, to
need
be
it.
honest
That's
with you.
so true, Father. I am a big fan. How should I say this? I shouldn't say big fan. I am a proponent of corporal punishment, in terms
Mhm.
of, I think that dudes selling weed on the corner, yep, I think they should be punished, especially if they're selling it to kids or something. Go tie them to a fence post and whip them, because
Mhm.
and don't throw them in prison where it's just going to go. I think these types of things. And again, we're going off topic, but I just think, but part of that is like, that's just life. Hey, you do something bad, you're gonna get here's your punishment, boom, and it's gonna hurt, and it's gonna make you not want to do it again. But you're not gonna get thrown in prison for
Yeah.
10 years for selling weed. It just, I mean, these are pretty
No.
basic things to me. And I mean, I don't
Of
know.
course, yeah, and it's I mean, you see it all the time how disconnected people have become from it. Like, how many videos do we need to see of some Dumbo getting out their car in Yellowstone Park and
Yeah,
like getting charged and gored by a buffalo? You know what I mean? Like,
yeah,
how many times do we have to watch that video? Part of me thinks to myself, well, reap what you sow, good on the buffalo, but part of me also thinks to myself, like, where have we come as a society that we don't realize that wild animals are wild and dangerous? I
right.
mean, I just saw a thing about this woman. I just saw a headline in the news about a woman who got mauled by a grizzly bear because it came up to her car and she rolled down the window to film it, and then she got attacked by, like, she's all of a sudden surprised she got attacked by a grizzly bear. I'm like, there's not a universe out there in which I willingly remove barriers of separation from me and a grizzly bear. Like,
No,
that doesn't
no,
exist. It's
crazy.
I'm leaving that window up. That's just real life. And so, but yeah, it's those things. It's We are living in that technology kind of like, technology creates idiots, and that's where we've come, and that's where AI is going to further us down that line. We're going to become idiots. I mean, complete idiots. I mean, I'm guilty. I am guilty. I used to know how to get around and remember
Hmm,
how to get back to places because
right,
I used to use a paper map,
right.
and then you'd follow written directions. And as you're going, you're paying attention to the things around you, and you are remembering the step by step process of getting from A to B. Now with GPS, I still use GPS to get to stuff around here in Cincinnati that I,
Right.
like, it's sad, but it's I mean, you just don't, it does the thinking for you, and so you shut off your brain. And we're going to end up in that reality where more and more, when we are already a dumbed down society so much, that, I mean, just look at the toilet that we circle down, as a collective whole anymore. And now you're going to add something like almost universal in its scope and breadth to that is non-human and controllable only by those, at best controllable by those who are hidden behind the curtain, let alone, if it actually gets out of control, which is one of the concerns of AI.
Yeah,
Even again, to not to invoke him too much, but Elon Musk again is one that is actually very much afraid that AI is getting to a point where soon it will become uncontrollable, and, there'll be a very difficult time separating reality from what is manufactured by AI. The time where people can, you know, control it versus not. And we have only scratched the surface in this about talking about the usage of it for cars and media and things like that. Well, what about other stuff that's controlled by electronics and computers? Like, what happens when AI is the sole controller of the military?
hmm,
What happens then? You know, and because I guarantee you, what we see being used here on in the civilian world is the tip of the spear as to
for
what is
sure.
actually available in the military world, because like many of these advancements, they get used in a military setting first, and then they come online to the consumer after the fact. It was that way with the internet. It was that way with GPS. It was that way with infrared and night vision and so many of these things. So y- they are always, that realm is always further ahead in development than we are. So when you literally have a non-human, I mean, humans are bad enough, but when you have a non-human controlling um, who gets weapons dropped on them and things like that, look out. I mean, like, it's a scary reality.
Well, and I think that that's a. I'd like to end the show, Father, with I guess your comments on. I saw yesterday. We'd already planned to do the show, and I saw yesterday the Catholic Answers, maybe something that some of our viewers are familiar with. A Novus Ordo publication, of course. Recently tried to run on their website a AI priest. Um, and as you might have imagined, Father, it lasted, I think, about an hour before they had to shut it down because of many different reasons. And people just obviously giving me a hard time. And I just had to kind of laugh about it because I thought, well, clearly we see that the Novus Ordo theologians are so at a loss, they have to let a computer answer the questions. And it's a, I don't know if you have any comments, Father. I just found it kind of incredible that I came right before our show and pretty interesting.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's two sides to really that aspect of the commenting on it. One is that, how much of the bugs haven't been worked out. I remember somebody recently, very recently,
Yeah.
showing me a picture, showing me some how like AI can generate pictures from descriptive words that you put in there.
Right.
And they had put in, like traditional Latin mass and, worship of the saints and things like this. And it created this magnificent, I mean, absolutely beautiful, unique photo, or like it looked like either an etching or a painting that was done sort of, um, and it was gorgeous, like real classical art looking to it. And it had, angels all surrounding this altar with all these, nondescript saints, these that are all kneeling and looking upon the priest as he's offering the sacrifice of the mass, and showing that unity of heaven and earth all together in the sacrifice of the mass. And it's like, wow, what a beautiful picture. But then when you looked closely at it, it had the priest raising up two chalices at the elevation,
Mm.
instead of being like either the host or the chalice.
Ah,
And you're
okay.
going,
Yeah, right.
something's you kind of look at it and you're like, something's not quite right about it. And it took a little bit before you're like, oh, that's not correct. And so, like, so first off, it shows that the limitations in that, even what is, very much impressive, that it still definitely has limitations in that regard. So now apply that to theology or morality and things like that. That, how can you really trust that it's not, that it's really good advice and things like that? Because there's no backstop to it.
Right.
The secondary aspect to it, the other side of the coin, though, um, is that, something that's sort of come up with us here, many times over the years, but also, including some recent incidents and things like that, of of just how necessary today it is to have truly really well trained clergy, and how necessary it is to have not only well trained clergy, but those who are trained, and then to have them work under experienced clergy, because the difference between training and experience is a vast one as
Hmm.
well, because there's a
Yeah.
lot of things that are not, you're not going to find in a book per se. You have to apply principles, you have to look at the entire dynamic of a situation, you have to be able to draw from experience of things that were similar, in which, certain approaches worked and certain approaches didn't, and life lessons to be gained from that. And it's like, in seminary you learn the principles, and then in life you learn the like the pastoral, application of those principles, and the good effects that they gain and things like that. And it's just years and years and years of knowledge built up over time and experience that comes from those things. But but it, because it was one of those aspects that there was an argument talking about, this person, this example was like, oh well, so and so is so intelligent and blah blah blah, and they're, this and this, and like, why would you question their training, as clergy, because they are just so over the top, knowledgeable about these things and all that type of stuff. And I kind of made a joke with Bishop McGuire. I said there's plenty of really intelligent people out there. There's a lot of people who are far more intelligent than I am, and they come to me for advice all the time. Because there's a difference between, I'm not the smartest guy in the room a lot of times. I'm not going to pretend that I am. I'm not going to claim that I am. I'm not going to anything like that. But I also know I've received pretty good training, and that I have a lot of experience over the years in that way. But that being said, if I was sitting in a room and it was me and, well, I mean, they're gone now, but I mean, up until the day they died, Bishop Dolan or Father Chicata, okay, I might have whatever at that point in time 10 years experience, but Bishop Dolan has 40 something years experience. I'm not going to default to my own. I'm going to definitely try to figure out what his take on it is. Why would I ignore that? Why would I forego that when, when I have it at my disposal? Um, and just a real reality to that. So it's you can't duplicate that with artificial intelligence. You can't duplicate that with a computer. A computer can do way more analyzing than I ever could, and a much faster speed than I ever could. It can draw from far more resources. It can quote way more things. It can translate from various different languages and everything like that. But it can't be a human. It can't replicate true experience. It can't take in all of the repercussions of a decision and an application of a decision, and see the wide parameters of just how much effect and how far and how long that reverberates, as a human being can. There's certain aspects to things that only man can do, and it can't be replaced. And so, yeah, you could, if you wanted to use AI to get answers to catechism questions, or find out quotations from something, or, find resources for things and stuff like that, it's perfect usage of such technology. It's akin in a way to when we used to have to look up things in the library by going to the Dewey Decimal System cards and fishing through and trying to find books that had information about certain subjects, and then going to pick out those books, and then going to go through those books, and then, photocopying and highlighting and making notations and everything like that to get some basic research done, versus being able to type into Google certain questions and find a whole myriad of resources that wouldn't be contained in just one library somewhere else, and that I can now utilize. It's the same thing with AI. AI can be used as a tool, but it can't be used as a replacement for man. It's just impossible.
Well, Father, I think that's a perfect way to wrap up the conversation. As always, I greatly appreciate it. Always appreciate having you on talking these topics. I would love to have you and Dr. Dan on sometime to talk about the dopamine. I think there are a few more important topics related to how we live our lives than that. I think that is just hugely important. So I'll get in touch with both of you soon. Hopefully we can plan that. We'll see. I know you're both a little bit busy, so I guess we'll we'll see what we can do. But hopefully we'll find a time.
We can always make time at some point along the way, and so, it's for something that important. It can definitely get worked out one way or another.
Perfect. Father, as always, we appreciate it. Everyone, please like, share, subscribe, comment, all of that stuff. And yeah, if you have any comments for Father, or any moral issues, well, you can actually, if you want to contact Father, I guess I don't know if I've actually ever done that, Father. What's the best way for people to contact you without just giving out your private phone number, which you probably wouldn't want me to do?
Yeah, I appreciate that not being, although it is, if anybody wants to find it, they can find it, I'm sure. But yeah, probably the best way would be to email, frmckenna at sdg.org. So that would be the best route for something like that.
Perfect. And if anyone wants to email me, Kevin89Davis@gmail.com. Don't ask me any moral questions, but if you have any ideas for podcasts, anything you'd like Father to talk about, I think that's actually great too. Father's always so great. I'm just like, hey, Father, you want to talk about this? And Father almost always says yes. It's really, really, really a great deal for me on this podcast. And I know it's great for everyone out there who gets to listen to it as well. Father, until next time, God bless you.